Welcome back, everyone. Today, we're bringing you an explainer that perfectly bridges the gap between ancient history and modern economics. We're going to completely break down the incredible financial journey of one of history's absolute greatest entrepreneurs, Abdul Rahman bin Awf. He was one of the very first 8 people to embrace Islam, and his story, it's literally a masterclass in resilience, business strategy, and pure ethics. We're going to look at exactly how he went from having absolutely nothing to amassing a net worth that rivals today's top billionaires, all without ever compromising his moral compass.
All right, let's just dive right into our roadmap for today. We'll start with the billionaire's tiers, then look at starting from zero, unpack his investment portfolio, reveal his golden rules of trade, and wrap up with his inexhaustible wealth.
So, Part 1, the billionaire's tiers.
To really understand the man behind all this money, you have to picture him at the absolute peak of his success. He's sitting in front of this lavish, incredibly rare meal, but he's not eating it. Instead, he's actually weeping. Why? Because he's remembering his close companions, like Musab and Hamza, who passed away with literally nothing. They didn't even have a proper shroud for burial. He was terrified that all his earthly wealth and success was somehow coming at the expense of his afterlife, so he just refused to eat. Right off the bat, this establishes his unbelievable moral compass. To him, wealth wasn't a prize, it was a massively heavy responsibility.
Part 2, starting from zero.
Now, keep in mind, Abdul Rahman didn't inherit this empire. When he migrated to Medina, he left his entire business behind and arrived completely penniless, 0 assets. To help him out, he was paired with a wealthy local named Saad, who generously offered him half of his massive estate and one of his houses. I mean, talk about the ultimate safety net, right? But Abdul Rahman politely declined, prayed for Saad, and just asked one simple question: show me the market.
And this brilliantly illustrates his whole mindset. He wasn't going to wait around for a handout. Starting with exactly 0 capital, he just went out and gathered loose wool to make camel ropes, selling them to travelers. He literally saved every single penny from this intense manual labor until he hit step 2, buying his very first camel. And from there, he scaled up, eventually becoming a massive livestock and foodstuff trader. He built this incredible momentum from absolute scratch.
Which brings us to Part 3, the investment portfolio.
So how exactly did he scale to such a massive level? Well, he was the ultimate diversified investor. He didn't just stick to camels. He aggressively spread his capital across 5 distinct asset classes: livestock, foodstuff operations, real estate, agricultural land, and pure gold. If one sector took a hit, his overall empire didn't even flinch.
And to give you a real sense of the sheer scale we're talking about here, just think about the number 700. There was a day when the entire city of Medina was suddenly engulfed in this massive, blinding dust storm. People actually rushed outside to see what on earth was happening. It wasn't a weather event. It was Abdul Rahman's incoming trade caravan. 700 camels, fully loaded with food and goods. Just imagine the logistics required to run an operation of that size back then.
Let's break down his physical assets for a second. He owned 5 separate houses in Medina, 3 of which were right next to the Prophet's mosque. He had his own massive primary residence, called the Grand House, plus highly productive farmlands that yielded enough to feed his whole extended family for over a year. He was even flipping real estate. At one point, he sold a plot of land for 40,000 gold dinars. And, completely true to form, the second that sale closed, he distributed that entire massive sum to the poor of his tribe and the Prophet's wives.
What's really fascinating here, especially from a macroeconomic perspective, is how he actually deployed that wealth. Back then, a few specific groups held a really tight monopoly over the Medina economy. So, Abdul Rahman used his vast trade network, bringing in goods from Yemen, Sham, and Egypt to completely flood the market with high-quality, fairly priced alternatives. He successfully broke the monopoly, forcing fair prices and bringing some much-needed economic stability to the newly formed Islamic State.
Moving on to Part 4, golden rules of trade.
So, you're probably wondering, what was the secret sauce? How did he pull this off without failing? It all boils down to 3 timeless rules. First, absolute integrity. He would never, ever sell defective goods. Second, strict risk management. He refused to sell on long-term credit, which totally protected him from default and kept him far away from usury. And third, he never underestimated a small profit margin.
And that third rule brings us to a brilliant economic concept he was mastering centuries before modern business schools, the capital turnover policy. His secret wasn't making huge profits on a single item. It was velocity. He'd accept a tiny margin just to sell his inventory instantly.
Then, he'd take that cash, buy more goods, and do it again and again. By spending his money so rapidly, his cumulative profits completely blew past the merchants who were sitting around waiting for high margins. Fast money over slow money.
Finally, Part 5, an inexhaustible wealth. Let's look at the staggering net worth he left behind at his passing. His inheritance was valued at 3.2 million gold dinars. The sheer physical volume of this gold was so insane that the bars literally had to be chopped up with axes to be divided. Historical sources actually report that the men's hands swelled up and blistered just from swinging the axes all day to distribute it.
To put that into perspective for us today, let's just do the math. A Byzantine gold dinar back then was about 4.25 grams of gold. If you calculate 3.2 million dinars using recent gold prices, his liquid gold legacy alone is worth approximately 1.3 billion US dollars today. He was quite literally a billionaire. And remember, that's just the nominal value of the gold. That's not even factoring in the vastly different purchasing power and inflation over the centuries.
And his will? Unbelievably generous. From that massive estate, he bequeathed 50,000 dinars straight to charity, 400 dinars to each of the 100 surviving veterans of Badr, plus thousands of horses, camels, and sheep. But here's the craziest part about all of this. Despite leaving behind this unbelievable fortune, historians note that he actually gave away far, far more money during his lifetime than he left behind.
His generosity was so deeply ingrained in the community that people used to say the entire city of Medina was a partner in his wealth. Literally. 1/3 of his money went to providing interest-free personal loans, another third went to outright paying off the debts of people who were struggling, and the final third went straight to direct charity. He effectively acted as a one-man central bank and a welfare state, all rolled into one.
He started with nothing but some gathered camel wool, built a heavily diversified billion-dollar empire through fiercely ethical trading, and then used that wealth to uplift an entire society. So, the question I want to leave you with today is this. How can you apply Abdul Rahman's principles of ethical wealth building and endless generosity in your own life? Which of his golden rules are you going to implement next? Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer. Keep learning, and I'll catch you in the next one.